Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Real glad that you could join us for another segment. In this segment, we're going to be speaking with Mr. Abizer Gaslightwala. He's Vice President, Head of U.S. Hematology and Oncology at Jazz Pharmaceuticals. He's joining us on the program to discuss the Nothing Small About It online program developed with leading cancer organizations focused exclusively on the psychosocial and emotional needs of the small cell lung cancer community. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Abizer Gaslightwala, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.
Well, as Vice President, Head of U.S. Hematology and Oncology at Jazz Pharmaceuticals, briefly give us a bit of your professional background and tell us what led you to Jazz.
Sure. Well, thank you for the question. So I've been in the pharma biotech space for over 20 years, but in particular in Jazz over the last year. And what really attracted me to Jazz Pharmaceuticals are the key products that they have that serve all the unmet needs of cancer patients. And so Zepzelca, which is a drug that we have in small cell lung cancer that we launched about a year ago, is just one of many other drugs that we sell for leukemia and for bone marrow transplant patients as well. And so across the portfolio, we sell these products that for patients that have high unmet need, that provide significant benefit for these patients while they're fighting their cancer. So super excited to lead this team and lead this product and portfolio for patients to help them get better outcomes.
What was it that led you to pursue a career in oncology and hematology?
Sure. So I've always enjoyed science. It's something I've always aspired to do, but I didn't necessarily want to be a physician as I thought about careers, but I wanted to have the opportunity to take science and apply it. And in the biotech space, and in particular oncology and cancer, is exactly that, where you have high-level science, and working in the role that I do, I get to take that science and really help others benefit from it and make sure we can educate healthcare providers, patients, other organizations around the great science, but ultimately the impact that it can have on patients. And in oncology, we're at a really rich time in terms of new therapies, new science that's driving those therapies, and new options and solutions for patients with the hope of curing many different types of cancer moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Normally, when I'm looking at the advertisements and things in the magazines in the waiting room, I'm seeing non-small cell lung cancer. How prevalent is small cell lung cancer?
Well, thank you for the question. That actually gets into Nothing Small About It, which we'll talk about shortly. So small cell lung cancer is about 15% of all new lung cancer diagnoses in the U.S. So it is the smaller minority. Most patients with lung cancer do present as non-small cell lung. But in particular, small cell lung, although it's only 15%, the outcomes and the mortality and the prognosis of this disease are very extreme, much worse than non-small cell lung. And so that's where we're excited to talk about additional education initiatives, such as Nothing Small About It, that really help patients and caregivers understand this disease, how to think about managing the disease, and providing support as well as educational material for them.
Is that one of the main reasons that it's so important that the healthcare industry as a whole dedicate more resources to small cell lung cancer?
Absolutely. I would say it's actually across the board. I mean, it's an interesting study or stat that about 50% of patients, when they're first diagnosed with cancer, spend less than 10 minutes speaking with their healthcare provider. And it's not a function of the healthcare provider doesn't have time. Sometimes that is the case, but just the shell shock and, being diagnosed with cancer, often it's difficult for a patient to have a long conversation. So because that initial conversation is so short, it's even more important that patients and their caregivers that are helping support them through this have an opportunity to engage in education on their own time, in their own way, outside of the physician's office when they need it. And so that's why the role of education around disease and disease management and how a patient and a caregiver needs to manage this is so important and a big part of what we do in our industry.
Now, is this Nothing Small About It program, is this an online program, or can it be done online or offline?
It is a total online virtual program, partly because we think that is the easiest and most accessible way to get it to patients. We do have some printed materials that our sales representatives do leave in physician offices, but a patient and a caregiver can access all this information through the Nothing Small About It website.
Now, is it more geared toward patients or toward caregivers or physicians, or is it a combination of anybody that's going to be affected by SCLC?
So it's predominantly focused on patients and their caregivers. That being said, a healthcare provider is always welcome to check out the site and actually see if that would be a benefit as they present it to patients that are newly diagnosed or that are going through their management of small cell lung cancer. So anyone can access the site. It's available and open to all. But again, the intent and the focus of the content and the navigation was focused on the patient and the caregiver. And if you were to go to the site, you'll see very clearly laid out. There's a nice introduction talking about nothing small about it, small cell lung cancer, and that initial cancer diagnosis. And then quickly as you navigate through, you will decide to click on relevant content, either as a patient or as a caregiver, that help not only educate one about the disease, but also how to think about, managing the disease, different ways to think about the courses that, you go up and down. A lot of testimonials from patients and caregivers themselves. We find that's very powerful to help those that are learning about it to hear from others and connect with their stories. So that's what you'll find. And again, that's predominantly for the patient and the caregiver. However, we do encourage HCPs to go visit the site and see if this would be a value utility for their patients.
What else makes this online program unique from other cancer care resources out there that are trying to educate as well?
So great question. And that was the genesis of Nothing Small About It. So as we thought a lot about the small cell lung patient journey in terms of that initial diagnosis, management, et cetera, for the patient and the caregiver, our team looked across the different tools and resources available. We talked with several different patient advocacy groups, and we also looked online to see what was available. And what we found was that most of all the support information was primarily focused on non-small cell lung cancer. As we talked earlier, that's the majority of newly diagnosed lung cancer cases in the U.S., and hence that's where you found most of the resources and focus and attention. So what we found was that because there wasn't a pointed, very focused area dedicated to small cell lung cancer, we actually engaged a number of different advocacy groups as well as people who worked as either patient counselors or had a role in healthcare delivery, and really engage them about what would be meaningful to create new tools and resources for patients and caregivers. So based on finding there was a gap, we did some research and focus groups with these people in the space themselves, and we were able to take some really key insights and learnings. But we didn't stop there. We actually did our own digital research as well. We looked at social media, we looked at support groups, and we found again that there was a lack of a place for people to go to share information or gather information. And so again, that led us to the whole notion of we should create Nothing Small About It to provide this focused resource and support system for small cell lung cancer patients.
Give us a website where we can learn more about the program, if you would.
Sure. It's www.nothing-small-about-it.com. So again, that's available for anyone and everyone who would like to check out the site.
Abizer, I appreciate you joining us here on the program this evening. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Abizer Gaslightwala, Vice President, Head of U.S. Hematology and Oncology at Jazz Pharmaceuticals. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, listen in, download it SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com, Health Professional Radio.